What is up, guys? Adventures Wandered here, coming to you with some new series I've got planning up pretty soon. It's going to be the first of several episodes that I'm going to do, I don't know, I think weekly, bi-weekly. Doesn't take too much effort for me to make these videos since it's mostly just me rambling about my thoughts. Anyway, to those that know me, to like the four people that know me. Well, my name is Comet. I'm a DM. I've been a professional DM for about 5 years or so. Um, and what I do is I've been hosting games for tons of people, and in order to understand how things go about, I guess it's just important to know how my campaigns do. So, how my campaigns work is, well, as you can see here, this is my luggage. It's actually what I call my black box, straight out of Waterdeep. It's a portable DM kit. It's got all my books, a bunch of miscellany, several sets of dice, my wooden DM screen, speakers, pens for my vinyl battle mats that I'll be showing off later, and these are things I use in order to host my D&D games. We don't need to see that later until, well, unless something comes up. Basically, what goes about is people call me up, I host games for them, but because I'm a portable DM, that allows me to host so many games so many times a week, and I have a lot of people that, I cater to. What I do in my campaigns, I take advantage of that fact of how I host my games by integrating all my player groups into the same world. That allows me to have my players' actions interact with one another, affect one another, and sometimes, actually a lot of the time, player group actions drastically affect what happens with the other player groups. Heck, half the time they actually end up working together, joint sessions in person. It's pretty awesome. It's been going well for the past 4 or so years that I've been employing this method. And I host about 9 groups. Even with work, I get to host at least once a week, so everything's pretty good. This whole series I've got planning up, and sorry I'm getting to it only 2 minutes into the video, is going to be called Lessons Learned. And what's going to be going on with this series is that every week that I'm hosting a session, I'm going to talk about a specific lesson that I learned as a DM or relearned, got reminded of after the session based on player actions, realizations I have mid-session, or just random shenanigans that I gain additional insight on. Popping off those intelligence investigation checks. Anyway, so I guess this first episode in the series is going to delve into a slightly more advanced topic than I thought. But hey, just it truly depends on what lesson I learned this week. And today, actually, I just came off with a session with a group known as the Balls of Fury, and it's a group of a bunch of cool brothers, and they play around. They're a group of 5 players, and they've been playing with me for about slightly over a year now. They're quite experienced, most of them. They've experienced high-level play, ascended play as well. One of them even plays as a demon lord. The other one is ascended up towards the level of a golden ancient dragon, going on Great Worm actually. And they are major players within the overall economy and ecology of my world. One of my players, they overthrow Orcus as the god of death. That's its own separate story. The other one has made up cities within the whole continent, which in my setting is called Lingrah'Vod. And so these players, they're all stellar guys. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. And today's session, however, they're playing a low to mid-tier campaign, approximately level 6 to 8, most of their characters. Actually, about 4 out of 5 of their characters were level 6. I think there was one level 8 player. And they were doing a specific quest, right? To understand the gravity of this quest is to understand how the game works. So at least my campaigns. So what happens with my campaigns is, like I mentioned before, a bunch of players, they go through different things. They have their own adventures, but overall, their adventures are sort of tied to one overarching story. That overarching story is the world itself, how the world changes based on their actions. Players can be good, players can be bad. I take into account all of that, and their actions shape the futures and sometimes the past when you get all noodly with time magic of the other player groups. This player group in particular actually is, along with many of my other player groups, are going through a world event known as, well, the world event. It's heavily based on towards a tiny book I wrote about my campaign setting, which is entitled Wanderer's Guide to Lingrah'Vod. And in that guide, during long ago, during the age of, I believe it was Tears, these people known as a Carsian theocracy came up, and they basically tried to turn the world into this one gestalt fleshball being by summoning these people called the Court of All Flesh, inspired by Papa Bugbear himself, from his Strongholds and Followers book. Some of you guys might recognize this. Ooh boy, it is a gift of the gods. I highly suggest MCDM stuff. Go for it. Anyway, so in my setting, I've adapted slightly the Cult of All Flesh backstory to be these alien beings from another realm, right? Born of flesh and sort of like that. But flesh is not their whole shtick. That's just the way we perceive them. Imagine a four-dimensional object moving through a three-dimensional world like ours. The only thing we'd be able to comprehend would be small aspects of them, and the only thing our minds translate are the fleshy, weird bits. These guys are aberrations to the letter, right? But this group in particular, as I mentioned before, my groups are scattered across the grounds of the entire continent, and the deathless ones, these guys that I've been showing, have been rising up all over the place. This is a big bad Maladar Dictum, right? Awesome guy. And my player groups are having a difficult time just struggling to fight and take down all of them, right? And they're popping off in various locations, decimating the landscape, terraforming the grounds to be more apt and adapt for them and their aberrations, flesh warp spawn, right? So my groups, they've been struggling in real life for months against these guys. Some groups, my older groups, a year actually. That's what world events are about. World events are special events in my campaign where all player groups have to work together to take care of a single threat. And that threat, if less than, I'd say, 3/4 of the groups all fail, then, well, sad, I'm gonna have to make a campaign setting that's new. Anyway, but the gravity of the situation is the world is at stake. The groups have to work together to take these guys down, and it's imperative that they take down, in particular, this guy, this deathless one, the Mad Oracle by the name of Ursofk, the Madness Flesh, the Sanity Drainer, the Insanity Field Madness Aura Crazy Darkness guy, right? He is one of the strongest of the Court of All Flesh, and all my player groups, I've actually had 3 player groups all in the same area, and we play every other week with these player groups, or once a month, and they've been working together just to take this one guy down and this huge amount of cultists that have overcome this entire large city and rural landscape, right? And they've worked so hard. It's been 3 months at the very least for one of my earlier player groups that got into this, and they understand that Urzofk is a big bad guy. Now, the group I was mentioning earlier, the Balls of Fury, they were one of the first groups to reach this city, known as the city of Grinskov. There's a lake within the city, and the people are going crazy. There's sanity checks going everywhere. At night, people hear this dripping sound at night, and they don't know where it's from. And it's because Ursofk is draining their sanity passively from his underground cultist temple beneath the lake. That's what players didn't know to start, but they begin to realize that sooner. After fighting through minions, solving puzzles, it was basically a noir mystery horror type game. Where they pieced together clues, and different groups knew different clues, and some groups had all the answers and other groups had all the questions, and vice versa, right? So they had to work together. The Balls of Fury, they were that strange player group that arrived at the final boss like 3 levels into the game, like early game. And I'm the kind of DM where if the players are able to find it, if they're able to get it, I don't see any problem with giving it to them. So the players, they found the enemy den. By some crazy turn of events, they found it, they were able to pass the stealth checks to infiltrate it, they beat down all the bad guys that they needed to and picked their fights well, and they found themselves right into the heart of the cultist den. But of course, they were so low level. So what happened was they were captured. And when they were captured, oh boy, they were brought right into the tippy top center basically above Ursov, and the cultists took them up, and they started just draining them of sanity to feed Ursov. Now, fast forward and towards the present. The players are resuming this game after a month of not playing. They've thought about what they've done, and me as a DM, I've thought about what I've done, what I'm going to do too. I planned out this whole massive dungeon, which I'm going to show you right now. Give me a moment while I just turn around real quick. Boom. This is my massive battle mat. Oh, let me get my cables out of the way. Whoops. Sorry, I was charging this just so I could have enough battery for the video. This massive dungeon complex, and there's actually another side to this, right? I can flip this over, and there's a whole other end of the battle mat, right? A massive dungeon complex that these players would have to go through. Heavily detailed. I planned out every single aspect of the map. I measured things. This map took me about almost 2 hours to make physically, and then I had to map it out in my head as well. There are multiple sections towards the map. The Temple of Lazuli is present up there. She's a goddess of rivers, waterfalls, and small lake creatures, right? Things like that. And it's the cultists had built their temple within a repurposed Temple of Azuri. If my players are listening to this, spoilers, Anyway, so that one group, right, among many, they understood that they had teammates on the other side that were there to help them. Perhaps that's why they understood that they could be a little bit reckless. They knew that they weren't alone. It's a different kind of game that you're playing when you're playing with D&D, when your players understand that they're not the only player group there. And I think it's more of a realistic thing that player groups can experience, because most of the times, in most D&D campaigns, players are playing the lone heroes. It's only the 4, 5, or 6 of them there, and that's it, right? If they fail, the world is over. But I feel like players get a greater sense of belonging, understanding for the world itself, if they realize that, hey, we can work together with other people. And for some meta knowledge, people like the meta knowledge that we're working together with real people, not just NPCs. Just some food for thought, different kind of game if you run a game where multiple player groups. Anyway, so this big mega dungeon of sorts, I planned it out so some player abilities could be utilized effectively. There are gates, different kinds of walls, strong walls, loose rock, multiple doors, multiple doorways opening towards different rooms, twisting hallways filled with traps that I have a mapped out thing on my phone for notes, right? This thing also doesn't show all the enemies that are passively waiting in rooms, just laying in wait, and all the traps I've situated hidden underneath rocks and all sorts of things, and different sorts of doorways and rubbles and gated doorways, epitaphs, strange geodes, some with crystals even, odd statues made out of blue sphinxes. Anyway, that's meta knowledge. Also some tiny maps that I have here off and towards the side, which are just signify smaller locations. Anyway, so bottom line is, I worked so hard to get this done. And most DMs, when they do that, what they want to do is they want players to experience all of this hard work they put in. But sometimes what the hard work you put in, you have to realize as a dungeon master that sometimes that's not what players want. That's not what the story demands. Heck, sometimes you'll realize that by putting them through all this stuff, you may just be railroading them. That hurts. Sometimes for you, sometimes for them, but hey, bottom line is, sometimes what you want is different than what is needed. What you prepare for, what you over-prepare for, is what may not be ideal for the time. Now, this is separate. Let me see if I can find the right thing right away. Aha, here it is. Now, when my players started out, they were being used as batteries, right? The Balls of Fury, their group. People were chained up and towards the walls, pressing upon here in this massive sort of pit. That circle within the center, this thing with a ball over there, I said to the players that was just a bottomless pit of empty darkness. And that is where the cultists had dug this 1,000-foot deep hole where Ursov, the Mad Oracle, was growing off of people's sanity, drawing energy from their own mind, their consciousness, turning them into dominated, mindless drones. Cultists, have it as you will, and they hooked up these people onto these onto these chains on towards the walls, and the people were present upon there being drained for their sanity, and the players were like scattered in all different sections of the room. Down that hallway, which leads off and towards a connection that eventually connects somewhere on towards the map, right? Down that hallway was just filled with magical darkness. And it was basically a cultist's way of trying to dissuade or hide away the entrance towards this true sanctum where Ursoft is just powering up. Take note, remember, that there are multiple player groups all playing within the same city, just doing different things, being assigned separate tasks by this overarching, well, I guess, quest giver NPC that, well, half of them didn't really listen to. But the cultists have been preparing, fighting against these multiple player groups, and they of course, they're skilled. They've got all the resources they need, right? So they have the ability to cast these high-level magics and have these high-level NPCs that I will show you now. So the players were hooked up there. They found a way to escape by the druid casting out conjure animals by waving his hands through his restraints, because it only takes some minor spell components, right? And what he was able to summon were these Calamandan shocker lizards. Think of them as these almost quadrupedal dinosaur-like creatures with crystals, blue crystals, lightning crystals jutting out from them. And they had the ability to shock people from a slight distance, maybe 10 to 15 feet, as well as they had a strong bite. So we made those Calamandan shocker lizards. It's their homebrew class of mine, homebrew creature of mine. Break the restraints, and they were free. They tried to save some other people, and some of them were actually very altruistic, because members of a second player group were present there. The first player group, the Balls of Fury, were unsure whether that was the case, but they took care of them all the same. They removed them of their restraints. Now this group, the Balls of Fury, they've been stuck here for a while, so their characters all have exhaustion. That's terrible. They've got disadvantage on all their ability checks, and they understood that if they got out of here, they'd have to fight their way through some guards, and then they'd have to fight their way through this, and maybe this, and whatever else I have hidden away on the other side of this map, right? But they understood that it would be a long fight for survival, not anything else. Maybe they'd be able to sabotage some things from the cult. Maybe they'd be able to help their companions that they were working together with. Maybe they'd be able to learn some information, but bottom line, they knew that it would be an uphill battle. But then they looked down into the pit. They looked down into the pit and they saw Ursoft. Some of them, they lost a huge amount of sanity, and they realized, wow, we've gone so deep into this that we are at the end. And they realized, now this party, level 6 characters, going up against what I planned to be a level 20, 17 threat for a four-man player group, right? Well, yeah, they realized that this is almost unbeatable, but we have a shot to take this down now. And some player groups, they may be thinking, but that'd be the end of their story. But remember, in my campaigns, these players understand that they're working with the world. They have like 6-9 other player groups. They're depending on them to win their fight so that they can succeed in the world event. And overall, as a huge player base of almost 80 to, well, no, realistically 40 to 60 active players, that this is their shot, right? Taking down Ursoft, one of the most powerful deathless ones, will severely cripple the enemy's strength, and that might lead towards a victory. So these group of 5 brave level 6 characters, they came up with a plan. One of them, from this loot box that he had found in the middle of a previous area, he had the bag of holding. Another player of mine knew that he had a high amount of concordance, which is sort of like a divine intervention, but the odds of success are extremely low, right? That is available towards all people. It's a feature from Matt Koval, DM from Strongholds and Followers. This book, as I mentioned earlier, right? He had an extreme amount of accordance with a deity of children's toy games and chants and trickery by the name of Enri. He was Enri, the child god, right? And he said Enri is one of Enri's favorite items is a bag of holding because of all the tricks he can play with it. What if I rolled for concordance and begged my god, Enri, for a second bag of holding. At first, I was thinking, what are my players up to? What could they possibly do to strike down this threat, this growing, looming threat that even at its juvenile stage could wipe the floor with them? For reference, these were level 6 characters, and Ursoff has 2 9th level spell slots. He is a 20 plus level caster with hundreds of units of HP, a high armor class, legendary resistances and actions, additional features that I've given him due to him siphoning sanity from not only the surrounding rural area in the city, but from the players and different player groups themselves who have been losing sanity. Even these guys that were hooked up towards the walls and slaves until they broke out were feeding Ursoft. And it's at this point, the player said, I'm gonna roll, because we have a shot. And I realized at that moment that the last line in the Dungeon Master's Guide for the Bag of Holding, one of the last few sentences states that if two bags of holding are placed inside one another, then an interdimensional rift will open up and an instantaneous gate to the astral plane will suddenly rip open, and anything within 10 feet, no saving throw, will be sucked in. I thought to myself, that just might do it. If they get that bag of holding into the center of Ursoff, they have enough time to stuff one bag of holding into the other bag of holding, and they don't die, and they're able to pull that off right in the center of Ursoff. Ursoff is of huge size in my setting right now. That's exactly enough. If you're in the center, 10-foot radius around that center, 1 5-foot block, that would do it. And the players understood that too. And I think one lesson learned, and it's not the main lesson learned I'm going to talk about right now, is as a DM, you are the enabler of your players. You are not the disabler. You are not their enemy. It is your job to make their dreams come true. I think that it's a very altruistic, a very, how do I say this, honorable task to be a DM, because you have that responsibility to make people happy, to make them understand that their dreams, their fantasies, quite literally, can be a reality in the bonds of your game. So this player group, they realized, us 6th level players, the odds of us getting out of here in the card of the cultists, over 100 cultists splattered across this area, plus their aberrant summons, the odds of success are low. Probably some of them will die, but they could all die right here and stop the Deathless One. That person, loyal to Enri, the child god, rolled his concordance. He had about a 10-15% chance of success. He rolled it and he got it. Enri came happy of their choice to ask him for assistance, and explained that he thought their plan could work, affirming the player's actions. Enri, the child god, gave them a simple, uncommon item, the Bag of Holding. Now they had 2. The druid activated, he's a druid, Circle of the Shepherd at 6th level, activated his unicorn spirit, healed up the party, but it's at this point, or slightly before, that cultists came in to check what the noise was all about. And this book is a descent into the Avernus book, and hope I'm not giving too many spoilers for some people here, but these are some stats for some awesome cultists, and there are like 12 different cultists in this one, right? Give me a moment. My phone is about to die. I must place the charger upon the phone. Please stand by, viewers. All right, we're good. We're back in business. So these cultists, I placed before them, and these players had all out exhaustion. Some of them, I think, at 2nd or 3rd level exhaustion. So that's severe. Their saving throws are being shot. Their abilities checks for stealth were being shot. Their team comp was comprised out of 2 rogues, 1 scout, 1 swashbuckler, a druid, a paladin of vengeance, a druid of the shepherd. So that's 4. And then I believe the last one was a cleric of knowledge, right? So they were up against a Black Gauntlet of Bane, a powerful melee tank paladin / cleric-esque character, as well as 2 Reapers of Baal, where I restarted them to be the Black Gauntlet of the Undying and the Reapers of the Deathless Ones. So I just adjusted some feats, added some things here, removed some spells there, adjusted them, the classic reflavoring of monsters. So they were up against these creatures, and the Black Gauntlets at CR6 and the Reapers at CR2, and there were 2 of them, full, perfectly high HP armor class. They were fresh, these bad guys. That's the Reaper, and there's a Black Gauntlet, and they even had magic items. I gave them magic items. I as a DM, I don't like pulling punches in front of my players, or even if they don't know I'm not pulling punches. I think I just don't want to dishonor or insult my players that way. My players are quite skilled as far as I'm concerned. So they were going up against those creatures. They fought them. And what they didn't understand is that the Reaper of Baal, while they were able to take the enemy down by excellent teamwork and flanking maneuvers and positioning, right? Those Shepherd using his summons perfectly, right? To just out of range of the Baal's terror aura, but just within range to shoot out their shocker lightning spittle. The rogues using it, the abilities of these minions to pop off their sneak attack was all quite good. Even the cleric did some tanking, and the paladin did some assistance as well. They fought through it at a slight cost of their HP and some spell slots. What they didn't know is that the Reaper, the Black Gauntlet, he held a spell shard in his hand, which is a type of spell scroll that is embedded in towards this magical gemstone. Functions as what's essentially as a spell scroll. And they thought it was a powerful spell. So what they did was they all focused the Black Gauntlet, and the spell shard dropped to the floor, and they were like, okay, we can deal with this later. He didn't activate it. What they didn't realize was the spell shard was already activated. It was a delayed sending scroll. And all they had to do was break that spell shard before 3 rounds passed. But they forgot about it in their victory. They continued planning what they would do with the Ursoff, all the while their sanity dropping, all the while trying to save people that were strapped on towards the walls. And when that happened, 3 rounds later, the spell shard sent the message. All the cultists down that hallway of magical energy, magical darkness, popped, and all enemies within half of this whole area just went to them. That's a total of 30 cultists plus summons, or around 30 cultists plus summons. Yeah. So they realized that they were out of time. It was now or never. They had to make the decision now, and actually the decision was made for them. If they tried to leave now, they were dead meat. They realized that they had to hope. Now, the paladin and the cleric knew that when they stuck their hand in down the hole, that they would deal massive amounts of damage the moment they just stepped foot into that hole and started falling. So the druid cast multiple summons. He pleaded with them to listen towards him, and he gave them the leader of the party gave a riling speech, right? All of them were psyched, and they were planning to jump down the 1,000-foot drop. The Aasimar paladin would fly up and would use his wings and steer them down, because there were like these floating rocks in the middle of the ground, and their plan was to go down there and die. Now, as I mentioned before, I put a lot of effort in this place. Not only that, but for every single character that I host for, I make it my duty as a DM to invest in each of those characters. The players never got to this place, never got to this map. They barely got to any map, actually. Just this. Maybe the outside room. But they understood that they were going to die if they did that. But they knew that they would die in an epic way. They would die the way their characters wanted, that they, as players, would have wanted, and it would be for the betterment of the group. It was not just metagame knowledge that they knew they would take down a boss. They knew that it would assist all the other play groups that are out there within the world setting, that they would be able to take down a deathless one at level 6. One of my other player groups, level 17, having trouble taking down a single deathless one. And they realized that they'd be able to do it. So they took their shot. They realized that if they went down, the person that was deepest would be taking the brunt of the damage. So they made a conga line lined up all the way over here with 2 Elder Shocker Lizards pumped up by a high-level aide. Then I believe it was the cleric, the paladin, the rogue, and the second rogue. Oh no, the paladin was at the very back to lift the third rogue. And basically, the swashbuckler rogue had both bags of holding. And their plan was, when they jump down, it's going to take 2 rounds for them to fall 1,000 feet as per falling rules. When they jump down there, the Calamand and Shocker Lizards would take the brunt of the damage. With Circle of the Shepherd and Aid, they'd be massive amounts of HP above the norm. So when they jump down, the Shocker Lizards would take the damage first. They made a Conga Lion, and then Cleric, then the Druid, then the second, then the first Rogue, the Scout, and then the other Rogue, and then eventually the Paladin. But what they didn't know is that there'd be a massive amount of damage as soon as they step foot into the deeper portions. Immediately, as soon as they step foot in there, first Shocker Lizard, I strike him with a Disintegrate, high level, right? Shocker Lizard, however, the Shocker Lizard takes 73 damage with all the bonuses that he has around 80 something, right? Shocker Lizard survives. So they have enough HP to get all the way to the bottom, but when they hit the bottom, boom, 20d6 damage max from falling. One of them instantaneously incaps the rogue, the scout rogue. The protector Aasimar pulls up the second rogue, the swashbuckler, and they roll for initiative against Ursoff. Now Ursoff, he is no slouch, even in this juvenile form. They roll for initiative and they roll high, but Ursoff gets a 15. The druid, I believe he casts Healing Word on towards the fallen rogue. The cleric and the rogue are getting ready to fight the enemy, and Ursoff opens up with his meld flesh ability, turning the cleric and the scout rogue into one gestalt being, so they only take 1 turn, and that's a cleric's turn, and she rolled low. And Ursoff is no slouch. He casts out Divine Word as a bonus action, as a legendary action, as a lair action at initiative 20, and immediately half the group is stunned, deafened, and blinded for a whole hour. The only people that are still up are the Paladin and the Druid, as well as the Swashbuckler Rogue with 2 bags of holding, but the Swashbuckler Rogue rolled low. The Paladin is getting ready to take his turn. Legendary action after the Druid tries to strike off on towards Ursoff is that Ursoff casts out Banishment off on towards the Paladin. And the Paladin in particular, his subtype is Celestial. He went straight off in towards Celestial Plane, or was it the Astral Plane? I don't know. It was in the heat of the moment. He was shunted out into the Astral Plane, and where the gods were fighting against Yaldabaoth, the Devourer, the over-deity of these Court of All Flesh, Deathless Ones, and Ursoff. And for all intents and purposes, he died. So all that was left were the Druid, who was then subsequently Power Word killed as soon as it was over Ursoff's turn. Right? And just a stunned cleric plus rogue scout combo meatball, and the one rogue with 2 bags of holding. It got to his turn. The one rogue with 2 bags of holding went to the center. Ursoff popped out a bite attack. He missed. He popped out a Bone Spire attack for 48 damage. He missed. For reference, the rogue has low life at this point. A third power spine shunted out from Ursoff's body, struck the rogue straight into the chest, impaling him, dealing almost half his HP in a single strike. But the rogue was still up. The rogue struck both bags of holding together. And as they were all engulfed in Ursoff, so was Ursoff engulfed in the arcane gate that opened up from the interdimensional spaces, tearing on towards one another. The group died. All of them. Every single one. But they beat Ursoff. They beat that CR buffed up 23 creature at level 6. They died. And I loved their characters. And I planned out everything that would happen towards them after the session. Their NPCs that they'd meet, the other interactions with other players perhaps, their backstories, how they would live out their lives after this world event if they survived, if everyone won, and how they'd go through this dungeon, how they'd have great stories to tell towards their peers and their other player groups. And sadly, these players didn't make it. These characters didn't make it. But that's a lesson learned. The players had an excellent time. They told me it was one of the best sessions they've ever had. And I realized that, realize again that sometimes as a DM it hurts, at least when the way I see my players, it hurts when they die. I've been DMing for 5 years professionally, and I'm no slouch when it comes to combat. I go all out all the time, and my players, when they die, they die. Oh, they die horrible deaths. As Papa Bugbear says, when the Earth Elemental incapacitates you, he steps on your head on the next round just to make sure you're dead. He pops off both of those failed life saving throws. It doesn't get easier. And when these players die, sometimes it's okay to let them. Sometimes it's not your place to move or things around behind the DM screen and find a way for them to live. Because sometimes it's okay to let players die when they are going to die the way you want them to. By players, I mean player characters. I'm so sorry. But I guess to summarize this whole thing, DM lessons learned. First of all, don't over-prepare. I don't think this was over-preparing, but let players play the way they want to, and always enable players. Don't be the killjoy that stops them from doing things the way they wanted to. And as long as it's within the rules, as long as they find creative ways to take down bosses, who would have thought the God Killer strategy, the 2 bags of holding and a 5-man level 6 party could take down that CR23 monster, right? Would do it, but let players find a way. D&D is about, making fantasies reality. So it's not our place to take it away from our players. Anyway, that was me, Comet, DM Comet from Adventures Wanted, and I guess we're going to end the first episode here. Next episode coming sometime next week, I think. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the session. And have any requests, put them in the comments below. Thanks for listening all the way, guys, and see you around.